Welcome back everyone. In this lesson we are going to discuss about parallel execution. The way we are going to achieve this is by using JUnit 5 and the Maven Surefire plugin. Before we start, you should note that the Playwright object is not thread safe, meaning you shouldn't use the same object across multiple threads. So because we have this limitation, we will need to execute our test by class, meaning we can execute classes in parallel, but will not be able to execute tests in the same class in parallel. So let's start by going to the JUnit documentation page, and over here we have a diagram that explains the different combinations that you can achieve by setting concurrent or same thread for mode default and mode classes default. So in our case we want to execute classes in parallel. So if you have multiple classes, each class will be executed on the same thread, and this way you will never have the same multiple tests from the same class running in parallel. So this would be the configuration that we want, where you have multiple classes, class A and class B, and the tests from each class are executed sequentially, but the classes are executed in parallel. We want to avoid this combination over here, where you execute the same class and multiple tests in parallel, because since Playwright is not thread safe, you need to make some special implementation and to synchronize for it. So what we are going to do next is we are going to copy the configuration that we want. So the first parameter over here doesn't do anything by itself, but you need it in addition with other two. So if we have same thread for mode default and concurrent for mode classes default, we'll execute our test in parallel by class. Okay, so let's go and add this to our Maven configuration. For this we need to navigate to our POM file, find our Maven Surefire plugin, and over here I'm going to add a configuration. Under this I'm going to add properties, and under this I'm going to add a new tag that is called configuration parameters. Let's check that this is fine. Configuration parameters. Perfect. And now I'm going to copy the properties that I copied from the JUnit documentation. Okay, next. We need to specify how many threads we want to have in parallel at one time. So if we go back to the documentation, you will be able to see over here that we have something called config strategy, which can take three values. One of them is fixed, meaning you can set a fixed number of threads, or you can use something called dynamic. If you use the dynamic strategy, you will let JUnit decide by itself how many threads to spawn at the moment, depending on the dynamic factor, which is a decimal number between 0 and 1, and this will take into account the number of cores that you have on your CPU. And for example, if I pass 0.5 and I have 4 cores, it will use 2 cores, so 50%. If I pass 1, it will use all the cores, so all 4 cores. Okay, so let's also add these two properties. So this will be dynamic, and the other one will be the dynamic factor. And I'm going to set this one to, let's say, 0.5. Okay, now another mention I should make is that by default JUnit, the way it runs, it will create a new class instance for each test in your class. For example, here I have only one test, but let's create another one. Let's add a 2 to it. So by default, it will create a class instance for each of these tests. And as I mentioned previously, Playwright object is not thread safe, so we need to create only one thread for this entire class. And the way to do that is by using an annotation called test instance that I'm going to place on the Playwright object, the Playwright runner, sorry. So I'm adding test instance, and I'm going to set the life cycle to be per class. So this means that I will only have one instance of the class for each test. Okay, next. I need to make some more changes here. I don't know why I declared this Playwright member field to be static. It won't work with static in parallel. And I'm going to set the sources to false, because I don't believe I have the Playwright Java source variable declared as an environment variable. And if I'm going to execute my test in parallel using Maven, it will complain about that and it will fail. Okay, next. Let's have at least two classes with 2 tests per class. So sign-in test, I already duplicated this test. I have the test here. Let's do the same for sign-up test. I'm going to make another test just so we have multiple tests to run in parallel. I'm going to call this setup test 2, and I'm going to disable the first test, the test that was written. So I'm going to write here Maven test, press enter, and now the parallel execution of our test should begin. So my expectation is that I will see 2 browsers running in parallel. One of them will execute the sign-in scenario and the other one the sign-up scenario. And as you can see, this is doing the sign-in and this will do the sign-up. Okay, let's wait for the second batch to finish. And let's check the results once everything is finished. Okay, we are almost done. So the sign-in test takes a bit longer. And this is all. Now, if you look over here, you can see that the results are a bit skewed, and you should know that this is a Maven Surefire bug. So it says over here that it has executed 3 tests in sign-up test and 1 test in sign-in test, but this is just a Maven Surefire plugin bug. Okay guys, so this was all for this lesson. See you guys in the next one.